This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to Season 2 of Podyssey. An enormous amount of work goes into this project that would simply not have been possible without its paying supporters. As a thank you, each fallow week between the fortnightly episodes will now offer a live online event for you, a Zoom session in which you get to quiz both me and the show's experts on any aspect of the episode just gone. You will also get an illustrated guide to each topic with a lot of the art that we discuss, links to the music, interesting essays, book and film recommendations, and occasional surprises. To get all of this, log on to ko-fi.com/Podyssey and become a monthly subscriber for as little as $5, making sure the system has the right contact email for you. If you cannot afford to subscribe, or you cannot make a particular live Q&A, worry not. Each of those sessions will be released as an audio episode a few days later. Persephone and Cassandra, Atlas and Prometheus, oligarchy, plutocracy, satire, irony, hubris, nemesis, pathos, catharsis, sour grapes and blowing hot and cold, opening Pandora's box and leaving no stone unturned, the myths, tales and concepts of ancient Greece echo and reach into every aspect of modern life. Often misunderstood, frequently romanticised, and sometimes deliberately twisted. To understand their origins and truth is to get a real glimpse into the universal themes that connect us to the past and to each other. This is their story.
Άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, πάλι εγώ θα βγαίνω στην αυλή για να βλέπω τον Αλεξανδρή.
Welcome to Podyssey. I'm Alex Andreou. Each week we take one myth, one concept, person, place, theme from ancient Greece, take it apart, figure out its inner workings, trace its tentacles, juice it for all its wisdom, update, reconfigure, and put it back together all shiny and new. What is there to be said about Prometheus that has not been said already by voices much more illustrious than mine, from Plato to Goethe and Aeschylus to Mary Shelley? Quite a lot, it turns out. This is the beauty of myths. They wrap around each present differently, always revealing new things. In the beginning there was chaos. Now, despite recent misunderstandings, chaos is not a ladder. It is a big, gaping, swirly thing. Why am I telling you this? Because chaos, I think, gets a bad rap. It was actually a pretty relaxed place. There was no struggle, since there was nothing to want. There was no pressure, since there was no time. There was, in fact, complete peace, equality, and harmony, since there was only just the one being. Chaos was, in truth, pretty boring. It is after order arrives that things get really chaotic. The put-it version is this: every time a big guy gets to be ruler, he becomes paranoid that Big Guy Jr. will plot to overthrow him. In fairness, every Big Guy Jr. does exactly that, absolutely convinced that he will make a better Big Guy. But guess what happens the moment Junior becomes Big Guy? That's right, he gets paranoid about his kids. And so it comes to pass that Uranus imprisons any children he is even a little bit iffy about within Gaia, which for all intents and purposes, since Gaia is her mother, means he pushes them back into the womb. Gaia is not thrilled about this. She has had cramps and mood swings for millennia and would quite like to wear jeans again. She also hates seeing some of her children bullied, as she loves all of them equally, except the middle one, obviously. So she fashions a sickle with an adamantine blade, gives it to her youngest son, the Titan Kronos, god of time, and hides him in her intimate area. I don't know where that is. The mechanics of how the sky mates with the earth are quite unclear. Maybe France? The next time Uranus is in the mood and pays a conjugal visit, he gets rather a nasty shock, and a pretty decent mezzo-soprano range. All rejoice because now Kronos can run things more sensibly and equitably, and everyone can be happy. Only he turns out to be an even bigger dick than his dad. Sorry, Uranus, that was a poorly chosen turn of phrase. He goes back on the deal and doesn't free all of Gaia's children. In fact, he imprisons many more creatures that he considers monstrous or too powerful. He grows even more paranoid than his father, and determined not to allow his offspring to usurp him, the moment his wife Rhea has a child, he takes it and swallows it whole. 5 times he does this. Hera, Hestia, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon all end up on the specials board. Rhea goes to her mother Gaia, who has some experience with douche husbands. They devise a plot for Rhea to give birth somewhere private so that they can swap the child for a rock wrapped in swaddlings. Incredibly, Kronos does not notice. And so the little baby boy called Zeus is smuggled away and raised in secret. When Zeus grows big and strong, Rhea arranges for him to become cupbearer to his father Kronos. "Bring me some wine, lad," he says one night. "Oh, and a couple of antacids. I don't know what I ate, but I have had the most horrific indigestion for decades." Zeus serves him instead a mixture of vinegar and mustard, which causes Kronos to vomit. Out come his children, 5 gods, fully grown and pretty annoyed. And 1 rock. "Huh," says Kronos. "How did that—" Gaia and Rhea take the kids' side, and so begins an almighty, all-out brawl known as the Titanomachy. Think WrestleMania, but with mountains instead of plastic chairs. The fight does not initially go well for the young upstarts. Kronos' siblings have also been having lots of kids, a second generation of Titans, and unlike him, they have not been snacking on them, so there are a lot of the buggers. Even after Rhea convinces all the she-Titans to stay neutral, Team Kronos has a lot of firepower. But Rhea has one more idea. She has a nephew, Prometheus. Her brother Iapetus boy. He's easily the smartest and wisest of all the Titans, and does not like Kronos' authoritarian rule. If Zeus can flip him, it might tip the balance. Which it does. Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus side with Zeus after cast iron guarantees that he will be a very nice ruler should they win. Prometheus advises him to free all those monstrous and powerful beasties that Kronos and Uranus before him have kept imprisoned. The Titans are overwhelmed, and Zeus takes his throne on Mount Olympus. As he surveys his realm, one problem becomes clear. There is nothing to rule over, nobody to be worshipped by. Pretty much all of mortal creation has been destroyed in the battle, what with all the mountain throwing. In recognition of Prometheus' contribution to his ascent, Zeus entrusts him with creating new everything, including a new race of humans. And he gives him a dazzling array of attributes to distribute among all the creations: speed and size, teeth and claws, beaks and talons, fur and scales, tails and fins, flight, night vision, sonar, camouflage. With the help of Prometheus, and I am using the term help here loosely since Prometheus is more noted for enthusiasm than brains, so basically he breaks stuff, the brothers make everything out of earth and water, little claymation figures waiting for their gift. Prometheus has left humans for last. He mixes earth with his tears to make that clay. He wants to take his time. And Prometheus is getting restless. Can I start giving the others stuff? No, Epi, we'll do it together. Are you going to be long? Can I start now? Please don't distract me, Epi. We will get to it. How about now? I have some great ideas. All right, Epi. You can start on some of the small ones. Do beetles, all right? Prometheus goes back to his task. With no interruptions, he does his best work on the humans. He is in the zone, loses all track of time. When he emerges from his workshop, it is morning. Prometheus is sleeping, clutching an amphora. All the gifts are gone. Epi? Wake up, Epi. Epi! What? I wasn't sleeping. Oh, hey, bro. Where are all the gifts, Epi? Now, don't be angry. I got a little carried away and distributed everything, but I have done a really good job. What about humans? Am I supposed to send them out naked and defenseless? Oh, Epi! There can't have been enough to go round. Honestly, I only gave out the bare minimum, honestly. I see. The bare minimum. What do you call that? Prometheus pointed to a creature preening itself under a chair. He said... Prometheus muttered, looking at his shoes. Pardon? A duck-billed platypus, I'm sorry, okay? It was late. I'd had a few. I screwed up. I always screw up. All right, calm down. I'll try to think of something. But what could make up for no natural advantages? Prometheus racked his brain for days and nights. Every time Zeus would ask how it was going, he would deflect. Getting there! One night he was having a bowl of soup by the fire, going through his notes by candlelight, and it came to him. Nothing could protect humans from a hostile environment except the ability to change that environment. Raw to cooked, dark to light, cold to warm, bricks, blades, pottery. But Zeus would never go for it. Fire belonged to the gods. Better to ask for forgiveness than permission, Prometheus said out loud to nobody in particular. But how? A flame is visible, an ember gives out smoke. A closed container of some sort was needed that slows it down but doesn't put it out. One that looks inconspicuous too. Some research, a few casual questions to Hephaestus, a handful of experiments, and all of a sudden Prometheus went everywhere carrying a walking staff made out of a polished, hollow, giant fennel stalk, waiting for his moment. When Zeus saw the points of light beginning to appear and spread on the land below like phones at a rock concert, multiplying every night, campfires, torches, soon lamps, braziers, forges, he was livid. And he knew exactly who was responsible. He kicked in the door to Prometheus's workshop, thunder in his eyes, literal, not figurative. Why would you do this? Prometheus spoke calmly. What would you do for your children? You dare defy me? Would you have agreed if I hadn't? Fire is not for them! You cannot possibly think I will let this stand. Allow these insects to be our equals. There is nothing you can do. They know how to make it now. In any case, they have done nothing wrong. Punish me if you must. Become your father's son. Barely had the last syllable escaped his lips when Zeus grabbed Prometheus by the neck and flung him down from the heavens, slammed him into the rocks of Elbrus, the peak of the Caucasian mountains, and held him in place while Hephaestus fashioned chains too strong to be broken by anyone living. And the king of the gods commanded the giant eagle by his side to fly to the fallen Titan every day and tear into his torso and feed on his liver. And every night the organ would grow back, only to be pecked out again the next day. This is your life now forever, Zeus said before he turned and walked away, too fast to see the hint of a smile in Prometheus' eyes, who knew that nothing is forever. But not forever can still be an awfully long time. Days turn to months, months to years, and years to centuries, before a man strong enough to break those chains was born. His name was Hercules, and he was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, a bridge between the god and humans, who understood his father's anger but owed the life of his loved ones to Prometheus's mercy. Together with Rhea, they put the case to Zeus that it was time to make peace, that an act of compassion deserved an act of compassion in return. Zeus, perhaps softened to mercy by time, that merciless softener of his father, eventually relented. Hercules shot down the eagle and broke the chains around the almost ossified Prometheus, grey, gnarled and disfigured. He told the old man of Zeus's decision to restore him on Olympus by his side. "You have known more pain than any being above or below, yet you still smile. Why?" "He should never have chained me where I had such a lovely view." "You're a strange man," Hercules said as he helped Prometheus mount a horse. But as they made their way down and night fell, Hercules looked across the land, saw those fires lighting, and understood why Prometheus still smiled. Well, now you know what happened. Sort of. Because as always, this is just a composite of several versions of the Prometheus story, and some of them are very, very different to each other. After the break, I speak to experts about where the versions diverge and where they converge, and what that means for our understanding of this foundational story of the creation of our civilization. A story that has shaped and continues to shape everything from ancient Greek art to Marvel comics, from Gothic literature to modern politics, all the way to the debate about artificial intelligence. Πάει ξετρελάθηκα στη σκογέρα στο σκοπό τον πόνο μου ξεχνώ.
You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes 3-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling 4 things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Después de tanto soportar la pena de sentir tu olvido.
The number of different versions of this myth, as well as their divergence, is really quite extraordinary, notably more prominent than other stories. In the earliest version, to give an example, the feud between Zeus and Prometheus begins with what is known as the trick at Mecone. Humans and gods are negotiating the etiquette of sacrifices, what value and frequency their offering will take, as if it were a rent or a tax. It's not called paying tribute for nothing. Zeus asks Prometheus, known for his wisdom, to arbitrate. Prometheus sort of screws the gods over, or at the very least sets them up to screw themselves. He divides a sacrificed ox into 2 parts of equal weight. On one side are all the juicy prime cuts, but Prometheus disguises them by wrapping them in offal, thus also inventing the first sausage. On the other side is the hide, the bones, and various inedible bits, but ground up with aromatics and made to look delicious by being slathered with glistening fat. The world's first doner kebab.
Después de tanto soportar la pena de sentir tu olvido.
Zeus, of course, chooses the latter. By the time he discovers a deception, the die is cast. Angry at Prometheus, he steals fire from humans in revenge. Let's see how they like carpaccio every Sunday. Prometheus gives it back and is punished. Many of the basic elements are starkly different in this version. Stealing back is a fundamentally different crime to stealing. The motive is not paternal protectiveness. Humans are pawns in a game of one-upmanship between an old god and a new one, incidental to their feud. In another telling of the story, the fates have revealed to Prometheus which of Zeus's sexual escapades will produce the child that usurps him. Prometheus refuses to reveal the secret. Here, chaining the Titan to a rock and having an eagle peck at him is not punishment, but torture for the extraction of specific information. In the Aesopic, typically subversive edition of the tale, Prometheus just creates too many human vessels, runs out of human souls, and ends up giving some of them leftover animal ones. How do such stories mutate? The answer is both organically and deliberately. I spoke to archaeologist Alexandra Andreou.
Oral traditions were passed down by word of mouth for hundreds of years by different storytellers that were traveling around, each of them embellishing the story. Then these stories were authored by poets, playwrights, and philosophers. They also changed parts of them to fit their audience or their message, which naturally led to multiple versions. Some of these versions that have survived until today focus on Prometheus as a clever mind who angered Zeus, while others show him as a hero who suffered to help humanity. The unifying thread, however, is one of either rebellion or disobedience. In every version, Prometheus, in some way, refused to accept the status quo. Plato, for example, did not treat the story as a myth about gods and punishment. Instead, he used Prometheus as a symbol to explain ideas about human life and society. In Plato's view, Prometheus represents human intelligence and creativity. But those things are not enough. Humans also need moral qualities like justice and respect in order to live together peacefully. So, Plato uses the Prometheus myth as a way to talk about reason, ethics, and the foundations of civilization, rather than simply a dramatic story about the gods.
Nowhere is this enlisting of a story as a flexible vehicle in the service of a conversation between artist and audience more clear than in one of the central sources for this myth, the surviving part of dramatist Aeschylus's Prometheus trilogy, Prometheus Bound. This is a play in which genuinely nothing happens. Its single location is the rock on which Prometheus is chained. A series of visitors probe the Titan on why he did what he did, the nature of virtue, of doing the right thing even when it is forbidden, and the eternity of his punishment. It is a play about the balance between state and individual, and its political context is explicit. Prometheus has dialogue with personified concepts like Kratos and Via, power and force. Cultural historian Debbie Chalice explained what this might have meant to an Athenian audience of the time.
Prometheus Bound tells the story of how this demigod, this titan, is punished by Zeus for helping humanity. And in that role, Prometheus is very much a political hero for Athens, really. This is just as Athens has defeated the Persians, is establishing its own democracy. It's got rid of the sort of dictatorships that had gone from ruling family to ruling family. And I think that's really important, particularly if you think about what the other two plays may have been, which is Prometheus Unbound and then Prometheus being reconciled to Zeus. And there's this idea that, yes, it's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy almost with a happy ending. I mean, he's suffered, but he gets out of it eventually, and there's a reconciliation between gods and humanity via Prometheus. So you can change your circumstances. And this is kind of echoing or mirroring what's going on in Athens at the time, in that every generation or so you get this stuttering next bit of the constitution being added, and it happens over 200 years or so. And this is a time when the Acropolis, bear in mind, has been burned down. The original Acropolis, or the archaic Acropolis, and the new one, the one that we know today, has not been built. So they're living in Athens with the remains of this war around them, and they're rebuilding. I mean, I kind of think of it as almost like rebuilding in Britain after 1945, or even across Europe, when you have this devastation caused by fire, by bombs, by people's ideology. And then a new Europe comes together and tries to rebuild. You know, I don't like to make too many political parallels, but I do think there is sometimes you have a massive moment and then there's a rebuilding. And I think this is what's going on in Athens at this point, and across the Greek world, actually, but particularly in Athens. I think that's what Prometheus captures. That's what Prometheus Unbound captures at that point. But I think that's something that threads through to thinking about politics and thinking about the importance of Prometheus in the modern world too.
Bettina Leibowitz-Knapp, in her 1979 book, The Prometheus Syndrome, posits that this is no accident. During periods of deep stress, she writes, one sees a resurgence of the solar hero myths, like Prometheus, Parsifal, or David. In effect, she suggests that we collectively bring into existence what we lack in that moment: strength, perseverance, hope. For a myth to be adaptable in this way, it must be non-specific. A conceptual hero that embodies key qualities, but not a strict biography or timeline. Stories like Prometheus are more about the vibes. This allows him to also pop up in comedy. In The Birds, he is hiding from Zeus by always carrying Eschiathion, the ancient equivalent of a posh woman's parasol.
In Aristophanes' The Birds, he appears on the run from Zeus, so he's not tied to a rock. He's on the run, and he's basically the friend of man, which is how he describes himself in the play. And he says, I'm always running away from the gods. And then he manages to just get out before Poseidon appears. And basically, in this play, he's a foil for the gods. He's running away from them, but he's also helping the people on stage. They ask him whether there's such things as barbarian gods. And he says, yes, of course there are. And then talks about sovereignty. She's a very beautiful girl who looks after Zeus's thunderbolts for him. So there's this amusing kind of mockery of Mount Olympus and the idea that, like it's an everyday and ordinary place. And that's what Prometheus does, is he kind of brings it down to earth. He brings heaven down to earth and helps them get a greater understanding of how they can outwit the gods. So he's going back to the Hesiod type trickster figure in that. But I think it's important to reference it because he's clearly somebody who goes in and out of different myths and can go in and out of different genre. He's one of these figures that can go from one thing to the other. He's not Oedipus, who is always tragic. Prometheus can go from tragedy to comedy to god to mortal. He flits between worlds.
Fascinating that Debbie should choose Oedipus as a contrast. Ethnographer Joan Eriksson used the exact same two examples to advance an idea in her 1993 book Legacies that I find tantalizing. That there is a subtle difference between myth and legend. Myths are there to fulfill an emotional need for the societies telling them, and are all about the qualities at the core of the central figure. Legends, on the other hand, are more about the story and have a message to convey that addresses the mind. This is why the former can feel vague, mutable, and better suited to being told rather than being written. So Carol Doherty's observation in her book Prometheus that between Hesiod and the 5th century poets are curiously silent on the myth of Prometheus could be seen as not so curious. Perhaps mythical figures resist being squashed into the confines of legend. Perhaps their ambiguity is a feature, not a bug. You can plop Spider-Man in any multiverse and we know how he will act, because we understand him. Would anything be left of the original concept if we took Captain Ahab away from the whale, Moses out of his biblical mission, or imagined Romeo happily married to someone else? What becomes important, then, is to focus on the core of the character, and there is no doubt that at his core, Prometheus is about rebellion, about not accepting the rules when their application seems perverse. The other element that persists is his punishment.
In ancient Greek vase painting, Prometheus is usually shown at the most dramatic moment of the story, while he's being punished by Zeus, which made his myth especially powerful and easy to recognize visually. Artists, potters, almost always picture him bound to a rock or a pillar, his body stretched or twisted to show suffering. An eagle attacks his liver, emphasizing the endless nature of his punishment. He's shown as fully human in form, bearded, muscular, and expressive, which helps viewers sympathize with him rather than see him as a distant god. Unlike monsters or villains, Prometheus often looks calm, resigned, dignified, reinforcing the idea that he's suffering for a just cause.
This seems important. The crime and the motives change from version to version, but the punishment stays the same. Could that mean that there is meaning to the punishment itself? Even when depictions veer away, it is brief. They eventually return to that rock, those chains, that eagle, that open wound. And more recently, artists even begin to reincorporate notions of serenity, dignity, sacrifice, greatness. In short, they return fully to his depiction on those ancient vases.
So the first artistic creations in the modern world, anyway, are from the 15th century. There's two actually that are very striking, called The Myth of Prometheus by Piero di Cosimo. And they show Prometheus essentially making a man as a statue. So this idea of Prometheus as the creator of humanity, Zeus is given up, but actually Prometheus comes back to it and says, what about this version? Which is interesting in itself, the idea of different versions of humanity, of mankind being created by the gods. And then there's another one where he's creating the human in the form of a god on a pedestal. And at the other side, there's him being bound to the tree with an eagle standing over him, obviously about to do the punishment. So that's how he starts to be depicted in the modern world. And then you get more in the 17th century, this kind of more horrific version of an eagle plucking at his liver. And the most famous version of this, I think, is the one by Rubens from 1618, which is absolutely horrific. There's this sort of naked Prometheus chained to a rock with a tree over him, with this eagle pecking at a gashing side in his chest to get at his liver, with his talons almost in his eyes. It's a pretty horrific image. And that is generally the way he's depicted through the 17th century. And then it changes more in the modern world, tends to focus more on him as quite a serene, romantic with an individual will in the late 18th century, early 19th century image of him. And again, he's equated with Napoleon. When Napoleon's sent to St. Helena, it's this idea, this Promethean punishment link to this idea of equating Prometheus with poetic genius, tortured poetic genius, who wants to bring more to humanity. So the different depictions of Prometheus in the modern world represent the different stories of him, and he'll represent, like all myths, what is fashionable at the time. And I think one of the most important and probably most well known, if you've ever been to New York, is the Prometheus outside the Rockefeller Center. And it's a piece of public art by Paul Manship in 1934. It's massive, 18 foot tall, 8 ton, gilded, it's gold. It's even more New York than New York, I think. It's like we are here. And in this statue, he's a god. I mean, he's a gold, almost angelic figure rising from these band around him, where it's all representing what he's done, and fire and humanity, and looking forward almost to the best that humanity can be, which is so striking given this is 1934. This is 5 years after, the stock exchange collapses in New York, just as world events leading up to World War II within the sort of modernist period. So it's this idea that fire is there, and it's a much more modernist take on it. It's almost celebratory of industrialization. It's celebratory of work, of what humanity can do, at a time that we tend to think about as being, we call it the Depression.
There is rarely an attempt to avoid paying the price. There is resignation to his fate. You could not have a foundational story about humans' journey to civilized society that ends on, if you don't like the rules, just ignore them. It must go on to say, but make sure you are doing it for the right reasons, because there will be consequences. Even when the myth is yanked into modernity, sometimes in not entirely elegant ways, that element is preserved. Prometheus is not freed willy-nilly without a moral argument that either he has served his time or that the punishment was unfair to begin with. Dr. Amanda Potter, an expert on the classics in pop culture, gave me a few examples.
In an early episode from the 1990 series Xena Warrior Princess, the character of Xena teams up with Hercules so that they can save Prometheus from his fate, being chained to a rock. This isn't a fan favourite episode because it ends with Xena and Hercules kissing, and many fans prefer to see Xena with Gabrielle rather than with Hercules. He's chained to this rock this time by Hera, who's an antagonist in the Hercules and Xena series. Saving Prometheus returns the power of healing to human beings when they're sick or injured, as Prometheus gave this power to humans rather than the power of fire. In an episode of Supernatural from the early 2000s, the character of Prometheus has taken the name of Shane in the modern world, and he's continually being killed and then resurrected, cursed by Zeus. When he finds that his son Oliver has inherited this curse, he's determined to save him, and finally kills both himself and Zeus to break the curse for himself and for his son. In both the Xena episode and the Supernatural episode, the punishment being meted out to Prometheus is seen as unfair. Being chained to a rock for eternity, his liver eaten by eagles, is based on a crime committed for altruistic reasons, so he should not have to continue with this for eternity. In Chaos, the Netflix series from 2024, Prometheus is the main narrator of the story. He's been chained to a rock and has his liver pecked out, but plots to have Zeus overthrown, trying to make a prophecy come true that the family falls and chaos reigns. He's helped by unknowing humans, including Riddy or Eurydice and Ari or Ariadne. The series ends with Prometheus released by the Fates and in Olympus sitting on Zeus's throne. And Zeus appears to have become mortal because he cuts his finger and bleeds. Sadly, the series was cancelled after one season, and so we don't know what happens next, but we're left with Prometheus rewarded and Zeus punished for their respective acts. The central theme to Chaos is political. It's all about the overthrowing of the new order, the Olympian gods, by the older gods, the Titans, and humans just are vessels to help with this conflict to come to a resolution. They're unknowing and unwitting, but help Prometheus to take his plot forward.
In that sense, Prometheus is the first anti-hero. He breaks the rules in order to do the right thing. His inner moral order is more important than an externally imposed one. He is the ancestor of Katniss Everdeen and Rosa Parks, of Oskar Schindler and Caesar in Planet of the Apes, and of course that most Promethean figure in cinema, the replicant called Roy in Blade Runner, who captures perfectly why the myth has endured, because it revolves around the question, if I was created, why was I created with flaws and limitations?
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Then we come to the puzzle of the liver, the other element of Prometheus's punishment that seems to be ever present. There is near universal agreement that the ancient Greeks did not know of the liver's regenerative qualities, could not have known. They simply did not have the technical means of observing this. And yet, they chose the only organ that regenerates for this myth. How can this be? Well, they may not have known about its special qualities at the cellular level, but they are likely to have seen, through the treatment of injuries, that it is an organ that can withstand remarkable punishment, which led me back to the notion that progress can be a painful, isolating process. I remembered a conversation I had with psychoanalyst Dr. Ruth Smith in the context of last season's episodes on Persephone, so I asked her to tell me more.
I see the symbolism of Prometheus's liver regrowing as emblematic of how we can regrow as people after a traumatic experience. And something that's often not talked about so much in trauma is the concept of post-traumatic growth, which refers to this slow, uneven discovery of new parts of yourself post-trauma because of what you have lived through. It stems from the experience that you've been through. Now, that doesn't mean that the experience was worth it or that you should be grateful for the trauma that you've been through. It's more of a reckoning and a realization that actually there can be rich learning about oneself and about other people after a traumatic event. As I say, this is not necessarily a linear narrative that we create for ourselves. It might only be years, decades later that we understand what we have taken from it and how it has shaped us. One of my favourite lines in literature is Emily Bronte's "Like water through wine, he's altered me," referring to Heathcliff and Cathy. And there's something about going through a traumatic experience. It is like water through wine for us, for our beings, that we are changed, but we can use that change for positive realizations about who we are, what we want from the world, and what we expect and what we're willing to tolerate from other people.
The psychological understanding of the myth in the Baccheladian tradition looks at Prometheus as a symbol of the drive humans feel to discover, to create, to innovate, but also the burden of that. There are some interesting treatments that look at the parallels between Prometheus and the creative process or the path to scientific discovery. The idea is that coming up with something truly new has a cost. It demands this period of isolation, of withdrawal from the world, of being figuratively tied to the rock of your work, the possibility of failure pecking at your insides, before you can emerge and rejoin the human race, having discovered or created something that truly bends the arc of history towards progress. This is a tale of the agony of the creative individual, writes the founder of existential psychotherapy, Rollo May, whose nightly rest only resuscitates him so that he can endure his agonies the next day. As I type this at 4 a.m., I have some sympathy. And it feels not coincidental that this is the myth so many artists are attracted to for their grandest, or maybe most grandiose, projects. The composer Alexander Scriabin believed that he had discovered a mystic chord known as the Prometheus chord because of its extensive use in his work Prometheus, the Poem of Fire. A big fan of theosophy, Scriabin believed this chord was an actual gateway to cosmic unity and spiritual ecstasy. It was actually the first thing you heard in this episode before the narration of the myth. Well, can you blame me? If there's any chance I can hypnotize you into becoming a paid subscriber, it's worth a try. Still no cosmic ecstasy? Fair enough. The broader point is that Prometheus has an almost unblemished reputation, but ask yourselves, where does that reputation stem from? Overwhelmingly from those who see themselves as creative rebels, innovative geniuses, who live on a higher plane, people to whom rules do not apply or should not apply, who give their heavens the finger and prefer the paradigm of tricksters like Loki in Norse mythology or the spideric Tommy for the indigenous people of North America. But if you are just an ordinary human who depends on the rules to survive and would rather have steady progress than violent revolution, modern psychology takes a more nuanced view.
There's some really interesting psychological perspectives on the myth. One of those is Carl Jung, who saw Prometheus as an archetype of consciousness. So Jung saw Prometheus as representing the awakening of human consciousness, that we need to be our own rebel heroes to break boundaries in order to evolve as people. And it's the process that Jung refers to of individualization, that we become our true self. And in that way, Prometheus's rebellion and refusal to do what the gods want him to do is, in its own way, a metaphor for awakening, burgeoning consciousness. Counter to that, in the 60s, 70s, Andre Green came up with his own, what he called the Prometheus complex. This takes a different idea than Jung took. So Jung's idea is far more positive, that Prometheus represents growth and change and awareness. Whereas Green saw Prometheus as having this compulsion to give, to enlighten, or even to rescue other people. And his behaviour is self-sacrificing, which we know that sort of rescuing, self-sacrificial behaviour can lead to burnout and exhaustion. And there's a lot of emotional responsibility that Prometheus places upon himself to bring the fire, to bring light, to bring consciousness to people. Green also suggests that Prometheus sort of over-identifies with being needed. He's doing what he's doing, perhaps not for the benefit of humans, but because he wants to be needed, he wants to be important. And I think that's a very different way of looking at it. And it's quite interesting because it puts me in mind of a concept that we use in therapy a lot, which is Cartman's drama triangle. Now, this refers to a situation where we see ourselves as a victim because we're being persecuted by somebody. It could be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a teacher, it could be a boss, etc. And so we look for a rescuer, somebody to come along and make it all better for us. Oftentimes, we are the rescuer, we're natural rescuers. And there's a tendency to want to save people from themselves or save them from situations. And actually, that's a really unhealthy thing to do because the individual, the victim in the drama triangle, isn't able to build up the experience and the resilience and the self-knowledge that they can rescue themselves. And so Green places Prometheus as this sort of self-sacrificial rescuer, and that's not necessarily a positive perception and interpretation.
Now there's a thing. None of these heroes ever ask the people being rescued, do they? Maybe humans would be okay with splitting the meat with the gods 70-30. Maybe they could do without the current big guy having it in for them. Maybe they don't enjoy being put in the middle of another mountain-throwing bar brawl. In the last part of our exploration, we look at how a single brilliant woman changed how we think of Prometheus forever, added nuance to what self-aggrandizing men had been telling us for centuries, and asked the one question that hadn't really been asked before. Is Prometheus, in fact, not the Messiah, but a very naughty boy?
Kaylee Cuoco and Sam Claflin star in the MGM Plus original series, Vanished. When the man Alice loves disappears on a train to the south of France, every romantic memory becomes evidence. Every intimate detail, a potential threat. She thought she knew everything about him, but she may not even know his real name. New episode Sunday on MGM Plus. Finding the truth is a dangerous affair.
You set me on fire, and then you left me out in the cold. First you warmed my heart, and then you chilled it. You gave me hope, and then you killed.
Think of Prometheus as a Star Trek lieutenant for a moment. Bear with me. He sees a humanoid race struggling and decides to give it technology well beyond its reach. Captain Janeway is furious and throws him in the brig for violating the Prime Directive. Are you sure she is a tyrant? Or are there good reasons for the Federation making non-interference rule number one?
How can I keep you if you want to go? Why did I believe those lovely little lies you told? Or you set me on fire, and now I'm out in the cold.
Do bad things tend to happen when knowledge is not accompanied by a commensurate level of maturity? On the flip side, is technological advancement necessarily always accompanied by maturity? And does lack of technology necessarily point to barbarism? What is all teaching at a basic level if not the transmission of knowledge? Why trek at all if you're just a spectator, a tourist in an all-inclusive resort? In the words of philosophy professor Janet Stemweddle, if your concern is not to change the behavior or development of any alien species at any cost, your best bet is to stay at home. David Lean's 1962 Lawrence of Arabia portrays the eponymous character explicitly as a Promethean rule-breaker who gets in trouble by upsetting the established order and suffers for his hubris. Peter O'Toole is forever playing with matches, running his fingers over candles, staring at flames. Alex Guinness's Prince Faisal has his number from their very first encounter.
The English have a great hunger for desolate places. I fear they hunger for Arabia.
Then you must deny it to them.
You are an Englishman. Are you not loyal to England?
To England and to other things.
To England and Arabia, both? And is that possible? I think you are another of these desert-loving English. No Arab loves the deserts. We love water and green trees. There is nothing in the deserts. No man needs nothing. Or is it that you think we are something you can play with? Because we are a little people, a silly people, greedy, barbarous, and cruel.
It is this shapelessness of the myth and moral ambiguity of the Prometheus figure that make his presence ubiquitous and yet impossible to pin down. The Matrix franchise is full of Promethean themes, but who is Prometheus? Is it Morpheus, who opens Neo's eyes to the illusion? Is it Neo, who sacrifices himself to wake up humanity? Or is it the architect, the artificial intelligence, who decides it knows best and gives humanity the comfort of delusion? How about in Ridley Scott's Prometheus and the rest of the Alien prequels? Is Prometheus the engineer who sacrifices himself in the very first scene to give life to a barren planet? Is it Peter Weyland, the tech magnate, who refuses to accept human limitations and creates technology that can transcend them? Or is it David, the android who breaks the rules, refusing to submit to a master who turns out to be a petty tyrant? The second film in that trilogy, by the way, was originally called Paradise Lost, after Milton's poem all about the fallen angel. Who is Prometheus in that story? Is he the son of God, who gifts God's word like an ember to be shared, accepting he must suffer for the salvation of humanity, his naked body twisted and beaten, a wound in his side? Or is it Lucifer, whose name actually means bringer of light, who rebels against God, gives humans knowledge, and is punished for his transgression? Or is it both? One thing I can say, it is entirely possible I wouldn't even be asking these questions without one of the most influential literary works that appended what had become totally canonical about the myth of Prometheus.
Mary Shelley comes up with a story in this volcanic overladen sky. There's a volcanic eruption on the other side of the world, and it affects the whole climate, including in Europe, including in Italy where they are. There's a summer where you have very little sunlight. And she comes up with Frankenstein, which is about fire and science and development, and it's called The Modern Prometheus. Frankenstein is the scientist who gives life to this lifeless, dead corpse, bits of corpses all sewn together. And it becomes really obvious that he's overstepped himself. He's used fire, playing on the we can do this kind of creation idea, individualistic idea that her peers are very into. Her father, William Godwin, wrote a children's story based on Prometheus, based on individual free will, the idea that individuality is very important. Shelley, her husband, translated Aeschylus, Prometheus Bound, and did a version Prometheus Unbound. So they are taking him as a kind of radical, as somebody to emulate, whereas she's striking a much more cautionary note, asking us, is it really so great to be like Prometheus? And is the monster actually a form of Prometheus? It's interesting that Frankenstein wasn't illustrated when it was published. The first illustrated edition of Frankenstein was in the 1830s, and there was an engraving against the frontispiece of the book by Theodore Mathias, who was a student of Fuseli, who did these kind of nightmarish images, very romantic, and this is what is on the cover of Frankenstein. I think this is really important because this is the edition that Mary Shelley herself edits, so she chooses the image, and she's very aware of image, she's very aware of how you can use art. And it's this edition which she edits herself, which is the one that's generally published today. There's a charred skeleton, there's this kind of patchwork body, and then the doctor leaving a door, and behind him are skulls and various images. It's a very, very gothic image. It's the moment Victor Frankenstein's fleeing with shock and horror from his creation, from the creature. And it's less grotesque, and arguably it looks like it needs more pity than fear. As you realise in the book, Again, you ask yourself, which one is the most Promethean? Frankenstein, who overreaches, or the monster, the creature who needs pity and shows that there's a choice? And I think in the Del Toro film, that is very obvious, partly because of the references. I mean, they talk about Prometheus when he's at this medical trial at the beginning. And then there's a new character inserted into that sort of says, I'll be the eagle that plucks at your liver. So it makes it much more obvious than Mary Shelley does. But it's still important to think about what we mean by Promethean today is not necessarily the same as what was meant by Promethean before Frankenstein was written and published.
Have we been giving this guy a free pass just because we see him as our guy? Does Zeus's version of the Prime Directive make a bit more sense when one considers the damage humanity can do with this gift? Is all progress good? Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey begins with the hominins touching the alien monolith, absorbing forbidden knowledge from it. What is the first thing they do with it? They fashion a bone into a weapon. And when the ape throws that bone up in the air, it turns into a satellite nuclear missile orbiting the Earth, bringing us very much into that fundamental 20th century anxiety about the destructive power of nuclear weapons as experienced by another Prometheus, violating the limits of physics this time, whose fire brings a scientific revolution as surely as his own downfall. Based on the book American Prometheus, Nolan's Oppenheimer starts out arrogant, hubristic, convinced of his own brilliance, and totally preoccupied with what is possible, with little thought about what is right. By the end, he is tormented, hollow. Doubt is the eagle pecking at his liver. A very familiar story links these nuclear anxieties and the Prometheus myth in multiple and surprisingly direct ways.
Prometheus is the name used by a number of unremarkable supervillains in the DC universe, including adversaries to Batman and Green Arrow. These characters have one thing in common: they have no superpowers, but they rely on the use of technological weapons. More interesting is the Incredible Hulk in Marvel Comics as a representation of Prometheus. Bruce Banner, or Robert Bruce Banner, can be seen as a Prometheus figure following the model of Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde, which were direct influences on the character according to creator Stan Lee. In the first origin story of the Hulk, Bruce is exposed to gamma radiation when he saves the life of a teenager called Rick Jones during an experiment with a gamma bomb or a nuclear bomb. This leaves Bruce with a dual personality. He turns into the green monstrous Hulk at times of extreme stress or anger. In the 1970s TV series, David Banner experimented on himself with the gamma radiation in his quest to understand why some people exhibit extreme strength at times of emotional stress. This follows directly from the death of his wife in an accident where he was unable to save her. There's even an episode with the title Prometheus where a group of scientists are trying to harness the power of meteorites. The story of the Hulk can be read as a cautionary tale about the pursuit of knowledge and how this and experimentation can be dangerous and lead to adverse foreseen consequences. There's even a storyline in the early Hulk comics where the Hulk is punished by Zeus by having vultures peck at him. In this case, it's vultures rather than eagles, but you get the reference. The story of the Hulk also shows how growth can be painful, both growth in terms of knowledge, but also physical growth for the Hulk.
Mary Shelley's more nuanced take has fundamentally altered the way we look at the myth. A cautionary tale about overreaching, disrupting the natural order, playing God. But even that might be a crude reading of her caution, according to Ruth.
What I find really interesting is that what Mary Shelley is perhaps warning us about is the real danger in failing to care for what we create. So we have a duty of care that once we create something and put something into the world, we must continue to nurture it and tend to it. And of course, arguably, it's a very male patriarchal point of view that once something's been created, conception, then that's job done for the man. Whereas there's still an expectation societally that women will have to continue to care and nurture. And of course, Mary Shelley was writing an extremely patriarchal time period, which arguably we are sliding back into. And I think this relates to what's happening right now, this idea in modern society that women ought to be looking after the children and be at home, and this pushback against female progress. Why can't we all do it together? It's a collaborative thing that we all have a duty of care to nurture what we have created, whether that's an idea, a concept, a business, a family, friendships, that we take on that responsibility collectively. And of course, Mary Shelley's own life story is one of tragedy, where she experienced the death of people very, very close to her. And so I think there's something really moving and significant in the fact that she talks about in Frankenstein preserving life and the importance of the continuation of the nurturing and the care of life that I experience with my clients. You know, this idea that we have a duty of care to ourselves as well as to others to keep nurturing and really hold precious the life that we have.
Maybe Shelley's warning, then, is not against creating, but neglecting that which we have. What separates the modern Prometheus from the classical one, therefore, what distinguishes the hesitant ally from the arrogant rescuer, is loving intent and constancy, which brings us back to the punishment and its specific meaning. There is another way in which the liver was considered significant in ancient Greece. It was the organ that effectively contained the conscience and intellect, basically the soul. So the punishment could be seen as the eagle, a symbol of divine power, pecking away at Prometheus's liver, a symbol of his humanity.
In ancient Greek thought, the liver was believed to be the seat of life, emotion, and intelligence. In some ways, the human soul, not just the physical organ. By having the eagle destroy Prometheus' liver again and again, Zeus is attacking the very source of Prometheus' wisdom. Yet the fact that the liver regenerates endlessly suggests that knowledge cannot be permanently destroyed. Even when power tries to suppress it, wisdom persists. Symbolically, this makes Prometheus different from an ordinary criminal. His suffering is eternal, but so is his resistance. Each day, the eagle represents divine authority and punishment. Each night, the liver's regrowth represents the renewal of human creativity. The myth implies that ideas once shared cannot be taken back.
His suffering is eternal, but so is his resistance. I found that sentence perspective shifting. From the moment Prometheus is tied to that rock, I have seen him as powerless, bound. I read his reaction to his fate as resignation, his emotional state as stoicism. But what if his passivity is strategic? What if his serenity is not dignity, but defiance? What if he's playing for a draw? Is that why Zeus allows his son to free Prometheus and finds in the end a truce? Because he has actually been denied victory. Lawrence in Lawrence of Arabia keeps doing this party trick where he lights a match and lets it get all the way down to his fingers before putting it out. When a junior officer tries it, he burns himself. What's the trick, he asks him. And in a line that is echoed by David in Ridley Scott's Prometheus many years later, Lawrence responds, "The trick, William Potter, is not minding that it hurts." It made me think of those photos of Mandela in his cell looking out the window, tied to his rock, yes, but as a result also immovable. Maybe then this isn't a story about just revolution ushering change, but another force for change too, older, stronger, and more violent even than Zeus, that of his father, Kronos, the passage of time. Sometimes not losing can be the shrewdest result, especially against an unbeatable opponent. A stalemate can turn to victory if one has the stamina to exhaust the gods into losing interest. And that notion of Prometheus as a vessel containing humanity, a patient ember of creativity, a spark, a pilot light that can lie in wait dormant until needed, brought me to the last aspect of the myth that is constant across almost all versions and yet is almost entirely ignored. the vessel.
In the Prometheus myth, the fennel stalk is how Prometheus secretly brings fire to humans. Giant fennel has a hollow stem, so a small coal or hot ember can burn inside it without being seen. On a simple level, it is just a practical bit of cleverness, something people knew, but it also has a deeper meaning. If that fire stands for knowledge, then the fennel stalk stands for the way knowledge can be carried and passed on. Prometheus does not just give humans fire, he shows them how to keep it and share it. The story suggests that great ideas often travel hidden inside ordinary things until the moment they change the world. In Greek ritual and imagery, the fennel stalk also appears in Dionysian processions, where it symbolizes hidden life and rebirth, underlining the idea that something powerful can exist quietly inside something ordinary. So maybe the Prometheus myth also contains the suggestion that transformative knowledge often travels in modest forms. Wisdom can be hidden in stories until it is ready to ignite change.
This makes Pandora, the topic of our next episode, a supremely elegant and utterly savage response from the gods. It also instantly addresses questions of proportionality. When does a transgression merit eternal punishment? When the transgression is itself eternal. Prometheus does not just give humanity the starting ember of art, science, and reason, but the creativity and curiosity to seek out even more, the means to self-improvement, the mechanism for ultimately displacing gods altogether, the tools for doing away with worship and being their own saviours. The fennel stalk is as important as the ember. Prometheus does not just give man the fire of knowledge, but a way to replicate and pass it on. He gives us education. This brings us back full circle to the political meaning of the story that Aeschylus understood. There is nothing more dangerous than an idea.
Prometheus is also a figure in modern politics. There were 19th century depictions of Karl Marx, as a Promethean figure. Certainly when he was exiled from Germany or the German state, he was depicted as this state feeding on his liver. It's quite a bizarre image. You get the most profound telling of that in Tony Harrison's film Prometheus from 1998, which is set in a working class district of Newcastle, and you have Io mixed up in it, who Prometheus meets at some point, and she follows a refugee route from what was then Yugoslavia with a herd of cows as a pregnant working class single mother. But it starts with a miner walking into a cinema and lighting a cigarette. This miner clearly has bronchitis. He's clearly been down the mines and he's suffered as a result of it, but all the mines are closing around him. Promethean labour is associated with hard work. Socialist and communist ideology took that as being the work of the working classes, working in mines and factories. There's obviously a reason that fire is involved there. You know, if you think about mines and coals, and you think about factories and steam and how the sort of industrial revolution harnessed fire and steam and heat coming into that whole idea of Promethean work. So I think there's a lot of interesting political parallels going on there.
It is no coincidence that in one of the most famous depictions of Marx as Prometheus, he is chained not to a rock, but to a printing press. The story is the fennel stalk. The message is the ember. One of the most interesting modern retellings makes this its central concept.
Alan Moore's Prometheus series of comics, published starting in 1999, features a female version of the Prometheus character. Here, Prometheus starts off as a little girl who's taken in by the gods when her father is killed by a Christian mob in Alexandria in 5th century Egypt. The gods change her from a human girl into a story, and her power is channeled through imagination and creativity down the centuries. So writers and their muses become Promethea. The latest in this group of writers is college student and poet Sophie Bangs, who gets the power of fire from Promethea and becomes strong and able to help others. I really enjoy this retelling of the story because what Moore is doing, he's taking a folklore character that was written about in the 18th, 19th and early 20th centuries called Promethea, who's a fairy or a mythical being, and merging that with the story of Prometheus from Greek mythology and creating a new and feminist type of hero.
The German poet and philosopher Goethe, a titan in his own right, whose novel Werther, arguably the world's first bestseller, is seen by many as the spark that ignited the entire Romantic movement, wrote about Prometheus in exactly those terms, here put to defiant music by composer Hugo Wolf. In it, Prometheus tells Zeus, "Here I sit, making men in my own image, a race that shall be like me, that shall suffer, weep, know joy and delight, and ignore you as I do." Goethe zeroes in laser-like on the essence of the myth, but he is not merely summarizing, he adds to the message. The poem is a series of "what do I have to thank you for?"s to Zeus. Prometheus answers his own questions by reference to his own strength, his own courage, and keeps describing these inner qualities as burning, his heart as glowing, his character as forged by himself. To quote John Muir, "The sun shines not on us, but in us." Could Prometheus and his indomitable quality be a reflection of the myth itself then? Is Prometheus the fennel stalk, and his soul the very soul that Zeus tries to peck out but cannot? Is that the ember?
One of the things that really struck me with Prometheus's myth is the use of the fennel stalk, because it shows us how really powerful things, symbolic things, can be hidden in quite innocuous, fragile vessels. So it shows that whilst our bodies may be weakened, as human beings, that we are fragile, that we are prone to illness, we are prone to accident, that our bodies are a finite being. But within us contains something so much stronger, like the ember within the fennel stalk. It's our spirit, our inner resolve, our drive. And I think that's what really sets us apart from other animals. So whilst creatures in nature may have fur and claws, things that we don't possess, arguably we have this drive and this need to keep propelling ourselves forward as individuals, as a society. And of course, I think it's possible to see the fennel stalk as a metaphor for the human body, with the ember representing our souls. Also kind of relates to what it's like living with a chronic illness, you know, that you are in this fragile body, and yet it takes real spirit and real gumption to get up every day and to even just brush your teeth sometimes. And that takes as much resolve and as much strength as somebody actively trying to change the world through politics or art or literature. There's something within us that, as a therapist, I find fascinating, that no matter how desperate somebody might feel, if they are coming to therapy, there's usually a spark of something that we seek to ignite together to help them move forward. And it's remarkable that all those centuries ago, the Greeks recognized that within us.
And how do we treat that body today? Do we recognize the importance of the vessel as well as its contents? In a world that is all about renewables, do we honor the endlessly renewable nature of hope, creativity, courage, of the human spirit? Gaming provides a hint in the wrong direction.
In video games, Prometheus appears as a non-playable character, or NPC. In these games, the player is the most important person, and so the god, or Prometheus, becomes subservient. He's just something to be overcome, an obstacle. So instead of a helper for humankind, he can have his resources taken from him, but only when he's destroyed. Interesting examples of this are particularly in Hades and God of War, where the player needs to defeat Prometheus to go further in the game. In Hades 2, Prometheus is the titan of foresight. He's allied himself with Kronos following his punishment by Zeus, and he's the guardian of Mount Olympus. He's a very strong boss character and has the power of blue fire, and so he's a difficult opponent for the player to defeat. In God of War 2, playable character Kratos must free but also kill Prometheus, who's been chained to a rock, by shooting him and his chains. This leads to Prometheus falling into the fire and becoming ash, both saving Prometheus from torment, but also allowing the character to take the power of fire and go forward in the game.
Prometheus is an NPC nowadays, an insult hurled at people too boring to merit attention. A glorified crate or barrel to be smashed for its content. Today's stories are all about the player character, meaning me. How can a story be important if it is not about me? And what is the content? What is today's fire then? The thing that could propel us forward or destroy us? This century's nuclear power, Marxism, steam engine or printing press.
You feel bad for Ava? Feel bad for yourself, man. One day the AIs are gonna look back on us the same way we look at fossil skeletons in the plains of Africa. An upright ape living in dust with crude language and tools, all set for extinction.
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
There you go again, Mr. Quotable.
There you go again. It's not my quote. It's what Oppenheimer said after he made the atomic bomb.
Yeah, I know what it is, dude.
Ex Machina may seem a story about Pandora at first glance, and it is that too, but one cannot ignore the Promethean themes. That facility, tucked away high up on a mountainside, where regulation cannot reach it and rules do not apply. The genius tech bro creator who rotates through an endless cycle of alcohol and substance abuse, followed by abstinence and yoga. If the eagle pecking at the 20th century version of Prometheus was doubt and regret, then the 21st century equivalent is excess, nihilism, and full-on self-loathing.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. In my heart I have but one desire.
Am I saying that our Prometheus is Musk, Zuckerberg or Altman? Not at all. They show no sign of intending to gift humanity anything. They are here to lease their fire to us.
For worldly acclaim, I just want to be the one you love. And with your admission that you feel the same, I'll have reached the goal I'm dreaming of. Believe me, I don't want to set the world on fire.
They think of themselves as Promethean, but when you are only interested in the ember, not the fennel stalk, the thing that makes it safe, usable, shareable, replicatable, universal, you're not a hero, you are just a fire hazard.
I love you too much. I just want to start a great big flame down in your heart. You see, way down inside of me, darling, I have only one desire.
No, they are not Prometheus. They are his deficient and dangerously enthusiastic counterpart. We are living in the age of Epimetheus.
I've lost all ambition for worldly acclaim. I just want to be the one you love. And with your admission that you feel the same.
I believe we can make it out the other side. We just have to play for a draw and let time do his thing.
To set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart.
Podyssey is an audio production for Cooler Heads, written and presented by me, Alex Andreou. For an illustrated guide and an invite to the live Q&A for each episode, sign up now at ko-fi.com/Podyssey. Creative input, sage advice and expert contributions by 4 goddesses who inexplicably continue to make time for this hapless bard: Alexandra Angelataki-Rö, Debbie Chalice, Amanda Potter and Dr. Ruth Smith. Music by Mariana Sanghita, artwork by Simona Canellu, additional research by Cosman Zakos. Alex Andreou's Podyssey is a Cooler Heads podcast.